Rowena Naidu as well, and she combined forces with our Girls to Women, Women to Girls project here in the Roaring Fork Valley.
Oh, great. So this is the Day of the Girl proclamation, whereas equality and universal access to education for every girl and boy are among the United Nations Millennium Development Goals supported by 189 countries, including the United States, and whereas the United Nations established October 11th as the annual International Day of the Girl, supported and co-sponsored by the United States and 97 other countries, and whereas the Day of the Girl campaign calls on communities across Colorado to recognize that girls face many injustices, including cell phones, unfortunately, such as discrimination, gender stereotypes, and lack of education. And whereas we seek to empower girls in Colorado to fight for their rights so that they can be full and equal participants in society. And whereas Pickens County joins the Blossom Project, Girls to Women, Women to Girls, and all girls in Pickens County to support increasing girls' participation in sports, science, and math-related activities, support improving the high school graduation rate for girls, and provide equal opportunities for all girls by speaking out against gender-based injustices, celebrating all girls' potential, and encouraging all girls to pursue their dreams, and now therefore let it be proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners that October 11th, 2012 is the Day of the Girl in Pickens County. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Do you want to say something about?
No, but I'd like to thank you on behalf of the girls who were not able to be present today. They were unable to get released from school. So I was hoping to pack your audience with a bunch of middle school girls, but unfortunately, middle school principal Tom Heald thought otherwise. So they were unable to work with this release for this. So.
Well, that sounds like an injustice.
These programs, though, are very, very important steps to one of the most important outcomes that we see is to provide increased opportunities for girls and women to improve their own economic self-sufficiency. And I'd like to acknowledge Commissioner Richards, who has been an integral part of the Girls to Women program here in this valley for the last 15 years. So I want to thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
The career in politics desk.
Yes, Jack.
Popular, but
Yeah, Sue, thanks for being here and all of you all that brought this forward. I think this is really a critical issue in our society, and it took, obviously, in the culture, hundreds of years to even get the vote. So here we are still talking about this. Thank God there's women in the world. It would be a horrible world without them.
Well, one of the most important things you see is that in developing countries, you see it through the Green Bank, with small microloans. You see it in a number of different ways that by increasing women's leadership in this area and girls' leadership in this area, it really is a path to self-sufficient, to improving economic standards for countries around the world. So thank you very much for acknowledging it here in this valley, and I will give this to Rowena, and I'll tell the girls at the middle school that they...
Give it to their principal. John, do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
There are no additions or deletions to the agenda, Mr. Chair.
The next item on our agenda is public comment. Are there members of the public who wish to make a comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to commissioner comments. Commissioners, any comments? Rob.
I have one. I would just like to throw a shout out to the Roaring Fork Leadership Program that puts together a program every year where people participate to learn civic engagement, leadership skills, and various other things to get people in the community more involved. One of the programs that they do. Their full program is a 8 or 9 month program, and actually I wish Sue had stuck around because she was instrumental in starting this years ago, and I believe she still sits on the advisory board and is very much involved with it. One of the programs that they do is a program taught by Jonathan Clark, and it's a program called Mastering Performance, and this program took place this last week. I did the Roaring Fork full program 3 years ago, but I was so enthralled with the Mastering Performance part of it that I went back to take it again on my own accord. And I knew that there were a few county people that are doing the Roaring Fork Leadership Program this year, but I think there were 10 county employees in that Mastering Performance class. I had an opportunity to work on a few things with Brian and John, and it's just a tremendous experience, and it really speaks to the type of people in our county various departments that they want to advance themselves, they want to better themselves, and it was just really a wonderful experience spending 3 days, 8:30 till 6 every day with an hour break on a lot of work on communication, work on integrity, work on visioning the future and making that future come to pass. And I think it's skills that our county will greatly, as an organization, will greatly be benefited by. So the kudos is to Roaring Fork Leadership as well as the county for allowing those people to have additional skills, because I think it was paid for by the county for those employees, and for the participants to go in there with their hearts and minds open to learn and grow as individuals for themselves and individuals as county employees. So it's a great program, and that was a great weekend sharing it with all those other county employees.
Great, thank you, Rob. Commissioners, any other comments? Yes, Rachel?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to follow up on such a joyful announcement. And I do think the Roaring Fork Leadership Program is just outstanding for our valley as well. But it was passed in the past week that we have passed an unfortunate and sad milestone that over 2,000 U.S. troops have been killed in Afghanistan, our longest war as a country. And there's thousands upon thousands who have been injured very severely. We're starting to see a lot more discussion of that in the newspaper, and we still see a markedly higher than civilian rate of suicide among the enlisted men and women. And so I would just like to ask that we take a moment of silence and acknowledge that sacrifice and loss, and offer our best energy or prayers for a peaceful outcome and some grace and peace to all those who've been injured and whose families have been torn apart by this war.
We'll have a moment of silence. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Michael.
Jack, any comments?
Yeah, on a lighter side, because the unfortunate reality of that war is a black mark in American history as far as I'm concerned, in all wars. But let's enjoy the fall, get out our snowsuits and start doing the dance. Hopefully we have snow every other night at least during the ski season.
Okay, on that note, we'll move on. We have the consent actions. The first item is work session minutes of September 11th and September 18th, 2012, and the regular meeting minutes of September 26th, 2012. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I'd like to move to approve the minutes of 9/11, 9/18, and 9/26.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next items are consent actions, first readings set for public hearing on October 24th. The first item is an ordinance amending Title IX, Roads and Public Places of Pickens County Code by adding a new section, 9.08, titled Address Standards. Ginny Boltman, Bruce Romero, and Cindy Hubin. I don't see Bruce. Where's Bruce?
He's in Vail taking care of business.
He is. Could you come forward and, I know we've covered this in work session, but I think given that there's a lot of interest in this particular ordinance, I noticed a headline that said Pickens County may order 150 address changes. So people are alarmed, maybe not by the ordinance, but certainly by being ordered around, at least the headline. So could you just outline what we're considering?
There was...
Ginny, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, Ginny Boltman, Pickens County Communications Department.
Thank you.
In 91, it wasn't an ordinance, it was a resolution was made by Pickens County to create an addressing committee and an addressing standards. That's lain quiet for 21 years. And now we're trying to codify what we've been doing for those last 21 years, which is following a standard and without really any backing to those rules that we've been following. So all this does is set down in words what we've been doing for the last 21 years and trying to create and keep a standard going for public safety and for ease of finding people.
That sounds very simple. I wonder why there's so much controversy. Commissioners, any questions? Yes, Jack.
Yeah, staff has indicated they're not going to actively pursue changing addresses. Would you share with us how other than new addresses, how this will be approached? So we have it in the record as a representation, so the public has some assurance of how we're going to go forward.
Right. So when an egregious hazard to public safety is brought to our attention, we'll have to address it, so to speak. We'll have to look into it, and there's an addressing committee whose job is to find out whether that area should be readdressed or should receive an address if it doesn't have one currently. That's the plan going forward, and to be standard in all of our addresses that we issue going forward, so there's no duplication of those. We have no plans and no money or staffing to go digging around into things that have already been addressed unless it's brought to our attention that it's an egregious hazard to public safety.
And in addition to that, the board asked us at the work session last week, a week ago, to bring back an implementation plan before we actually implemented any new readdressing with the community. So it's our understanding that we need to bring that back to you as soon as we can.
Thank you. Rob?
You know, we talked about this implementation plan with some of the things like the consideration of cost to the homeowner and various things like that. You know, and I think part of the fear of the general public is that we're going to pass this ordinance, but we don't have a plan on how we're going to enact the ordinance. So we haven't developed what's going to be in that plan, but we're moving forward with this ordinance. But like you said, we're not going to go out digging for people to make changes. So I'm questioning, this has been on our docket since, what did we say, 91? Should we not pass this with an implementation plan so that people know how this ordinance is going to be used, and what's your response to that?
Well, I think John would like to respond as well, but quickly, I think that what this ordinance would do is give us the authority to move forward on new addressing. We do get in new building permits on a daily basis. We get in requests from folks who have a lot that they're planning on, submitting for a building permit. We have a lot of circumstances that aren't about readdressing and changing anyone's address, current address. So this ordinance gives us the authority to at least have some authority to newly address properties. So that's one provision. The other is that it is our understanding that we wouldn't be implementing any readdressing without your approval of an implementation plan to do that. If you remember last May, you had asked us, well, what are the repercussions? What are all the nonconformities out there based on this system? And Mary gave us a presentation at your work session in May that showed us a lot of the more prominent issues of nonconformity, and where we probably had some concern from a life safety perspective as well, just based on the calls and inability to find properties. So we understand that we need to weave all that in together so that people aren't shocked, so that in fact there's a process that people can understand when it gets to their neighborhood. And so it is sort of a phased approach, and I understand it is a little awkward, but I think we heard you pretty clearly at your work session about how that would be implemented.
And one of the concerns I think that's been talked about is that if there's a new development on a driveway that has a existing structure on it, that it will affect the existing structure because now there are two homes on a driveway, therefore becoming a street, and it changes. So it's not just new development, it's a new development can trigger something for old development as well. So therefore there's cost implications, hassle implications for that existing person on that street or on that private driveway. You understand the scenario that I'm, and how are we going to handle that? Because it's really a dual of the two things that you just said. Mm-hmm. One, making sure we have a plan to go forward with new addressing, but waiting for the process that we're going to develop as a board for the old addressing. But if that triggers a change.
A little clarification, it's 3 or more.
Okay. So
not 2 or more. So, which can make a big difference for some people. That's part of the definition of what constitutes a road, a street. Mm-hmm. And we didn't make that definition up because we've been working on it for so long. We've had plenty of chance to review other ordinances around the United States, and it seems to be a standard. That's why we settled on 3 or more. Human dwellings. Human dwelling equals addressable structure for us. We're not talking about the chicken coop that also has to have a phone in it. We're talking about where a human dwells, and that's the definition for us for addressable structures. I wanted to answer your question about cost. Last week you brought that up, and we've done some research. We didn't have to go very far. We went right over to the clerk's office, who told us that when the assessor's office, the clerk's office, mortgage companies and title companies are dealing with addresses, they're not looking at the street address. They're looking at the legal address. So when you go to change your address with those companies, basically no notification unless your mailing address is changing with them as well needs to be made. So that's one thing that was a concern of how much is that going to cost? And Rachel had mentioned that last week. What's it going to cost? And then we looked into other things like you can change your address online with Colorado DMV now, and you don't have to go down to Glenwood and get a new license. You change your license on the back, and when you go to renew your license when it's due, your new address will already be on there. So some little things like that. Of course, there will be costs and hassles changing stationery, things like that. And if they already have a very fancy writing on a rock, etching on a rock, that kind of thing. So, but I just wanted to bring that you had asked us about that last week, and we did a little bit of research. And so far as straight up costs, it's all in the notification, not in an expense.
John, did you have a comment?
Well, the discussions moved a little bit, but I think what we had talked about was exactly what Cindy had described. Is right now we're addressing every day, and we're dealing with these questions every day, and we're using a process much like the one that's proposed here. The question is really, the questions were kind of multi-layered. One was just making sure that our authority to do what we're currently doing is appropriately codified. And I think at our last work session, at least staff's understanding of what the direction we're operating under is, let's go ahead and get that authority codified to do what we're already doing. But that before we went and talked about making changes to problematic areas that may not have development or building permit, the other addressing issues that we're already dealing with right now, that we would come back to the board, we commit that we would not exercise that authority, which I think is concerning to the public, without first coming back to you guys with an implementation plan and a more thorough look at what that means. And so, you know, we are doing this. Rob, to your point, we have been doing it. This is in part a cleanup and in part a developing a process for how we're going to address the public safety issues and such moving forward.
Rachel?
Thank you. This really strikes me as being parallel to our on-site wastewater treatment system inspection program, which we adopted, put on the codes, even though it took us a couple of years to have the funding to enforce that program. And there was probably a year or more of outreach that Carla did with the real estate community about these new provisions so that when houses sold, they would be prepared, it wouldn't come as a shock. And so I'm comfortable with adopting it for that premise of, things moving forward. I think, it may be something we want to have some language in the ordinance by second reading that makes it clear to the public. Something like, shall not be enforced on existing residences until there's an implementation plan approved by the BOCC, or something like that. So we can be very clear and the direction isn't lost, and it wasn't just a side note in our conversation. So that's one thought for the board. The other is that, I'd really like to see us, in developing that implementation plan, put together somewhat of a, a change of address kit. And, that way, whoever we're dealing with doesn't have to be the one to go to the post office to get the little cards to send out and things like that. And we could develop some email templates that people could then email on to their mortgage provider, email on to their friends, or however they'd like to. But we might be able to develop the tools that make it as easy as possible for a homeowner when that is occurring. And so those are kind of my thoughts on the implementation side. But the other thing I'm concerned about is on page 14 of our memo, under the appeals. When we saw this in the work session not long ago, it stated that it was going to be a 25-day time period for an appeal. And this is now, whether we got an old copy in our packet or what, but our last work session said 25 days, and the ordinance we're looking at now says 15 days.
Thank you.
And so I'd like to see that corrected. And, I still am not so sure that we don't want to say, 30 days or something like that. I mean, I don't know why. Because we've talked before about how sometimes it's difficult to get a hold of owners, and they may not be aware of the changes in the notification. And I would allow you, ask you to address this, but will these be registered mail going to the homeowners about the problem? I mean, how is notification documented in a way that, I think we get it back at least, and we know that a delivery attempt was tried, but I'd like to kind of think about how that, and maybe you can clear that up at second reading, but how should the note, is it going to be a written return receipt requested, whatever?
So there's lots of choices. There's certified mail, the registered, and the return receipt. So you would like us to make that choice and put it in there?
Yeah, I think that we should have some process where we know it's very standardized and someone can't say, I never got my mail because you have the return receipt, or whatever that process is, so that the steps are very clear.
That's a board, the board has to agree on that. That's Rachel's idea. Does the board agree that we should think about
how they're noticed?
So, yes, there's
As well as 30 days, let's just do it.
There's a nodding going around, so. Anything else, Rachel?
Well, I guess the other thing to check in on the board with is would adding language, again, along the lines to explain our intent that the ordinance shall not be enforced on existing residents until there's an implementation plan approved by the BOCC. You know, and if there's issues with that language, I'm happy to take a look at it if there's some other language.
I can understand the intent, but what if tomorrow a new development has gone through the process of approvals and platting and et cetera, and they're ready to get an address? You mean we wait until that occurs?
No, I mean, that would impact existing residences.
Okay, so then you're clarifying for readdressing.
For readdressing.
Would you agree with?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that because that's what we've said we would do.
Rob?
I agree with that, but I might add without consent of the property owner, because they might want to just move forward with it
Yeah.
without the process in place. And they might say, okay, let's change the address, you know, and let's do it now so I don't have to
Sure.
do it later.
I agree with that.
And
That's
so they
good.
can do it on their own time frame at that point.
Okay, so we'll incorporate that too at some point. Yes, Rachel?
And one other, I was trying to flip through here. I know that we have had correspondences with Marcelle Larson about her concern, and particularly she didn't like the term pleasant sounding names. Has that been removed?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I believe it's still there.
You know, I just find that to be just such a, here we go, it's page 5 of our memo. I really didn't see that in this again, but it might have been somewhere else. You know, I just think that the character of the Old West had things like Slaughterhouse Bridge and Cemetery Lane. You know, I don't want us to go so pleasant sounding that, you know, we can't make reference or have some of those great names. You know, over in Crested Butte, they have Poverty Gulch and, you know, a few kind of fun little teases on themselves. And, you know, I just don't want to make this a clean, sterile type of naming process.
We had taken that out.
You have taken that out. Okay, so,
The local flavor is still in there, but the part that talks about pleasant sounding has been removed.
okay, thank you.
Does the board agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Rob?
I have a copy of that, those emails with Marcella. I think we were all copied on. I don't know if you want to put it in the record. There were 3 emails from her, and they're all in that packet.
You know, I'm just going to read Marcella's letter. It's a lengthy letter, but she couldn't be here today. She wanted me to recap the last meeting for her. And I don't know, you know, it's like Mark Twain's Life on the Mississippi. And halfway down the Mississippi, he was asked to describe all the sandbars that they'd gone by. He had no idea that he would have to do that. And so I was not capable of telling her what transpired in the last meeting, but I will be capable of telling her I read her letter to the public, so that'll make me feel better. But, so bear with me. Yes, Chad?
Michael, thanks for letting me ask this question. Before you read that, would it be appropriate maybe to take John's comment before we start in another? Johnny, I saw his hand. You're the chairman, I understand, but before we start a whole another round of, because that's a lot different discussion.
I just had a comment before there's a motion, that's all.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to read this because Marcella couldn't be here, and she's passionate about this issue. You have to understand that she's passionate about this issue. So, dear County Commissioners and affected landowners, I am today asking the BOCC to move the benignly titled address ordinance off its consent agenda and to postpone consideration on first reading of its highly flawed and deceptively titled address ordinance draft for another day. Unfortunately, because this meeting happens to be in the middle of the workday, it looks like I won't be able to attend in person. If the commissioners don't understand that this ordinance isn't ready in its current draft for a second draft, then I would suggest they revisit the multiple problems posed vested rights for one, property owners who have made improvements based on permits, and even the First Amendment. Amazingly enough, this draft says that the name of your private road, and this is mentioned by Rachel, should be pleasant sounding. And if you don't agree to rename your road, well, hey, they will do it for you. Question, where will they place the signs? Because they can't do that on your property without indicating the Fifth Amendment. And the Fifth Amendment takings claim, the most basic land use claim out there, physical occupation by the government. To the affected landowners, you may not know that the county is poised to quickly adopt this ordinance that will require hundreds of landowners to readdress their properties because they say there are emergency response issues that require this measure. For landowners, this will require you to expend significant time and funds to comply. They have actually a list of property owners affected, but you haven't been personally notified. You may wonder why this measure is required. While there may be a handful of cases relating to emergency response time, the county hasn't crafted its ordinance to deal with those real safety issues, but rather seeks to apply this ordinance countywide. And to be clear, despite assurances that there will be baby steps in terms of compliance and staff statements that the ordinance won't really be enforced against you right now, the ordinance as drafted today will actually require you today to comply. This means that if you have 3 or more addressable structures, which is broadly defined to include most every building you might have on your property, would be subject to the following language via the proposed ordinance. All roads that serve 3 or more addressable structures shall be named regardless of whether the ownership is public or private. A road refers to any highway, road, street, avenue, lane, private way, or similarly paved gravel or dirt thoroughfare. A road name assigned by Pickett County shall not constitute or imply acceptance of the road as a public way. Further, when you go in on an attempt to comply, you'll learn that you can't actually name your own road located on private property, but rather that there's a committee that will decide, based on a number of criteria, whether your proposed name is pleasant sounding, no joke, has the BOCC forgotten about the First Amendment. Even assuming you and the committee agree on your new street name, you will have to spend a lot of time and money to comply, especially those of you who have already made improvements to your entries like gates and signages. All of that will have to be ripped out to comply. Then there's also the logistical headache, which, by my estimation, would include the following. Notice to the assessor regarding the address change, redeeding the properties, including deeds of trust, and any leases on the property to properly reflect the change in the legal description. There, some lenders might object. Change to existing title insurance, which might include a fee. Change to property insurance, change to vehicle insurance and vehicle registration, change to driver's license. This couldn't be done over the internet. Have any of you been to Glenwood and spent an entire day with respect to the same? Notification of USPS, UPS, FedEx, etc. Notification of family and friends. No, I haven't moved, but suddenly the county can't find me, so change of hunting and fishing licenses, change of professional licenses, change of all utility addresses, including payments of deposits as if you were a new customer, change of all your billing addresses. Commissioners, I'd like you to put the adoption of this highly flawed ordinance on hold. In the newspaper, blah, 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 Michael Owsley represented there would be baby steps with regard to the adoption of this ordinance, and then an implementation plan would be in place before adoption. The people who are affected by this ordinance need to know about it. Please disclose the list of affected property owners before you move this along, and actually contact them. Please take the time to do the work to make this right. Sincerely, Marcella Larson. So that's a passionate response to what we're doing here. I think some of the questions were actually answered in our discussion previously, including what seems to be happening now, which is an implementation plan coming before us before we start doing addresses. So I just wanted to read that to satisfy Marcella's series of letters, actually. This is her last one. Any further questions, comments?
I'm waiting for John's feedback, please.
Oh, John?
I only have one comment, and also to thank Rob for handing over the emails. If anybody else, board or staff, has any emails that, other than the one that Michael just read, they should be submitted to Lindy for the record, and we maintain them that way. My comment in regard to the ordinance is on, I believe it's page 1 of the ordinance, and what's nominated as paragraph 6. I think that paragraph presents somewhat of a problem in that it apparently defers enforcement of the ordinance to a number of different individuals by title, and then also agencies outside of the county. I think that ultimate resolution of this ordinance should be like all other ordinances, and that's with the BOCC. So I think that the county might be better served by simply striking that paragraph.
Cindy and Ginny, are you familiar with what John's talking about? Board? Is that?
I'm not sure what John said. I hate to be so thick.
No, that's okay.
Jack, if you look at the ordinance, which is Exhibit 1.
Right, at the bottom of the page.
Bottom of the page, paragraph 6, it reads, the BOCC further finds the Pickens County Code Enforcement Officer, Director of Community Development, Director of the Communications Center, fire agencies in Pickens County, and their designees shall be authorized to enforce the ordinance and the code adopted therein. And I think it's preferred practice to adhere to our previous code adoption processes, whereby the enforcement of all code provisions resides with the BOCC and not with any other individuals or designees.
Yeah, I want to clarify what you said. I would certainly tend to agree with that. I mean, we have the authority, and I don't know if state statute gave any of these other agencies, for example, that authority.
So, yes, Rachel?
I wasn't on that point.
So we're in agreement with our attorney that we should include that. Okay. Yes, Rachel?
Yes, thank you. This is just a thought for the board, and I do not have suggested language, but on the sections about the committee, perhaps a line that the selection of name, the committee shall give deference to the selection of the name by the participating landholders if it, hits all the criteria for safety and not duplicative and things like that. The idea of a committee out there somewhere is always a little scary, and maybe it's just kind of worth adding something that there should be deference to the choice of the affected landowners, if there's a majority and a group of 7, or if there's, a clear path and consensus. Again, as long as it requires all the safety standards and things like that, and isn't, vulgar, language like that. But I think we'd put something there to make the committee process sound a little friendlier, and that it's just there to make sure these things happen instead of are put off forever and ever. That would be a suggestion if the board thinks that has merit to it. The other thing, I'd just like to make a comment. I live at Hunter Creek Condominiums. I moved over there in 1988, and I don't even know when we got renamed to Vine Street, because it was the exact same thing. It was too many units on Lone Pine Road, and at some point in time, it became Hunter Creek Condominiums became addressed as Vine Street. It must have been an action by the city at that time. And I remember it being kind of without a hitch. I don't remember being a big deal. And so it's true, I got my mail at the post office box then and still do, but it didn't affect my mortgage or my documents in that sort of way. And so anyhow, I think these switches have happened in the past without too much pain.
And Rachel, to your point, Michael,
No, yeah, go ahead.
to your point, we haven't gone over it recently, but I think back in May when we discussed this with you, we are setting up a website through communications that allows someone to go in and request the name they want, and then it's reviewed by the standards to ensure that it, meets the standards, that it's not duplicated, that sort of thing. But the hope is that people will be able to choose their own names, and that this committee will get together very rarely to make those decisions.
Because we don't want to have to come up with a name for them. Be better if they be better received if they were the ones choosing it, as well as, it's kind of a headache to think of someone else's road name all the time. We would like to develop a list, and Pickens County residents could add to that list of ideas for future road names that could be on that same website. Kind of a collaborative effort by Pickens County residents.
Yes, Jack?
Yeah, on that point, I prefer people to come in with their own names and not develop a list. Why have a list? I mean, then we'll add to the list and it will be an encyclopedia someday. I don't know. But going on to for the bigger issue, I'm going to support this ordinance. I think it's more than timely. And what I'd like to see for second reading is with the changes we've made, etc., it comes back to us in italics or a different color so we can focus on those changes. Certainly this is a matter of statewide concern. The CRF statutes enable the commissioners to do this. Our home rule charter addresses this, and we have been, just simply put, lax in addressing this, to no pun intended. To get this done, I mean, this is an important issue. I remember an analogous situation, but not the same, when 911 came into being. So I don't know how the rest of the county dealt with it, but we were required to change our addresses. And I didn't hear all this hullabaloo and property rights and First Amendment stuff at that time. I respectfully disagree with Marcella. She's an individual with a lot of talent and can write a very well-written letter, but I don't think she's on point on every item she raised, though it's very positive to have the public overlooking what we're doing and giving us feedback. But I'm ready to move forward with this, with the changes, and come back and see how it feels once we've got those things incorporated in the new ordinance, if in fact this passes as first reading.
Just in the interest of sort of balanced approach here, I recently just got a letter from Steve Waldeck, and it's much shorter than Marcellus, and I'll read it. Jack, Rob, George, Michael, and Rachel, I recently worked through a Pickens County address issue, and I'm not sure this is right. I think that she's referring to Jenny, but it says Dee Dee Gunyon.
No, we worked with Dee Dee,
Yeah.
a co-worker.
Okay, Dee Dee Gunyon. She was very responsive, thoughtful, and competent in dealing with my particular situation. A solution was figured out quickly, and I am confident that she can handle any issue that arises from the new address ordinance. Her commitment to customer service was evident in my situation, and you are lucky to have someone with these skills on your team. Please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions. Steve Waldeck of Steeplechase Construction. So that's, there's lots of views out there. So, yes, Rob.
Mindy, I forwarded that to you.
Okay. Any further comments? Is there a motion? Yes, sir.
I would like to move to approve an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, amending Title IX, parentheses, roads and public places, close parentheses, of the Pickens County Code by adding a new section 9.08 titled Address Standards. And my motion would include those additions or changes that we have discussed here today and directed staff to incorporate.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Cindy and Jenny. Appreciate it. very
Thank you.
much. The next item is an ordinance accepting a conservation easement under and conveyance of climbing areas on Red Butte Ranch subdivision. Barb, you want to fill us in on this?
Get this map up for you. While that's booting up, this ordinance is asking the Board of County Commissioners to accept the dedication of 2 property interests that Red Butte Ranch is going to convey. Red Butte Ranch is located along McLean Flats Road. It was originally part of the Stein Ranch, and in 2000, it was subdivided to create a large lot subdivision, which included 5 residential properties and a large agricultural area. It was amended. That plat was amended in 2009, and as part of that process, Red Butte Ranch offered to convey 2 property interests to the county, which I will show on this map here. There's the map. The first one is a conservation easement, which is outlined in red. It includes the knoll known as the North Butte up there on the northwest portion.
There should be a telephone on the remote. That's the mic.
Okay. I always pick up the wrong instrument. Oh, here we go. Pointer. So, I'm not exactly sure how to move this. Oh, here we go. That red area there that I'm kind of tracing is the cliffs of the conservation easement. That conservation easement covers all the natural areas of the property, and it will be held by Pickens County and by Aspen Valley Land Trust. Aspen Valley Land Trust will act as the lead agency, so they'll be doing all the general administrative work on that one. The other dedication that Red Butte Ranch will be making to the county will be 2 properties in fee that include climbing areas. The first one is an ice climbing area that is located.
This is a red one.
Thank you. Right there. That's the ice climbing area known as Sewer Falls. It's been used by the public for some time, and it is approximately ½ an acre. And then this property here, outlined in gold, is Gold Butte. Is the Gold Butte area. It was several years ago a popular climbing area, but for liability reasons has been closed to the public for quite some time. And when that property is dedicated, we are recommending that it remain closed until a management plan can be put in place for that property. Red Butte Ranch has provided all the documents to make this transaction, and we're seeking acceptance by the county for these 2 properties. And I just want to acknowledge Red Butte Ranch and thank them for this very generous donation. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah. For the record, I'm Herb Klein. I represent the owners of the various parcels of the Red Butte Ranch, and I want to thank the board for its working with us over the years to get to this point. I am not going to be here for the second reading, so if there are substantive comments or things you'd like to discuss, that would be great. Alan Richmond is our planner. He'll be here on second reading. But if there's anything that comes to mind now that you'd like to discuss with me, that would be great. Otherwise, we've been through the documents. They've been accepted by the staff. John Ely worked with us on the climbing deed. We were here before you last spring and talked about some of those issues, and John and I were able to work those out. Not only John and I, but also the Open Space Board. So we're in pretty good shape on all that.
Board, any questions? Rachel?
I just wanted to acknowledge George Newman in his absence. He's in Washington, D.C., discussing some matters of concern to the board, and wasn't able to be here today, but I know he's been kind of continuing to prod this process along, and I want to thank you for that, and thank you for working with him and the owners as well.
Jack?
Yeah, I would add to the thanks to the property owner. I can remember days gone by in the 70s and 80s I climbed here. I don't, to be honest, know if it was legal then. That time was before. Since it was closed, I never went back. But this is a great compliment to our recreational amenities in our community, close at hand. And I think it's got a high rating on the fun meter. So thank you. And one question for John, just to reiterate from our staff. We have obviously gone through all the liability issue, and do we include this in a document that now this is a covered area within our liability?
That'll happen automatically when we take title to the property.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you.
I'll make a comment. When this original development proposal came forward, I voted against this proposal for a number of reasons. It's substantially changed the nature of the original development that was outlined by the original owners, and in my opinion, made development of 3 units here much more likely than they would have been in the old development plan. Including those 3 units, there is an access road that is going to access McLean Flats Road, which at a point on McLean Flats Road that I just don't think we need another access to, either for construction or for the residents there. And I suppose it's going to be named at some point. We'll have to name that. So, so I'm going to vote against this just on the basis of being consistent with the opposition to this development and its impacts on the community. And I feel that strongly about it, that I just don't think this was a good deal for the public. So those are my comments. Any other comments, board? Is there a motion? Yes, Jack?
I'd like to move to approve an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, accepting a conservation easement and conveyance of climbing areas on Red Butte Ranch subdivision.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I guess you're staying there, aren't you, Barb? We have an ordinance authorizing the acquisition of the Canyon parcel. Barb, you want to outline what that is?
Sure. Ron Canyon owns property located near the Wingo Boat Ramp in the Mid-Valley across from Lazy Glen. And he has offered to sell us a portion of that property, which is outlined here in red. That's about 1.5 acres. And that will add to the overall area there that's being used by the public to access the river at that point. I don't know how familiar you folks are with the use there, but that's become a very popular river access point for boaters in the valley. We administer the commercial rafters that take out at that point, and in 2011 we had 4,750 people just on those commercial operators take out at that point. In addition to that, there's several private boaters, kayakers, rafters, people in duckies that take out at that point and put in. The BLM manages the people that put in at that point, and they have over 40 permits that they operate out of there, so it can be tremendously busy at that point. And the area there that's available for the public is really just this large shoulder here, which you'll sometimes see large buses for commercial operators with trailers with several rafts stacked up on it. So you can have dozens and dozens of people just hanging out here on the highway shoulder in a very congested area at times. This acquisition will pick up land that's next to that and give areas that already exist or pockets for people to gather away from the road and actually sheltered by vegetation that will, give them a place to rest, to undress, to relax before or after getting on or off the river while their cars are being, the buses are being loaded up, adding to the safety there, adding to the enjoyment of the people using that access area. We'll also be getting a trail easement along a bench that's up here for an old ditch. We don't plan to open that anytime immediately because we'd have to cooperate with the BLM and uses there, but it preserves the opportunity for public access on that bench as well. The asking price from Mr. Keenan is $50,000, and the Open Space Board has recommended this contract to you.
Questions for Barb? Yes, Rachel?
Yes. In terms of more explanation, the little sliver of that looks like tree-lined property between the red line and the highway.
Right here?
Yeah. Who owns that?
That is CDOT.
Okay.
So they actually built the concrete ramp that goes down, and it's partially on their land and partially on BLM land.
So we would be working with CDOT on the joint management plan of how this will proceed in the future. Are you seeing the potential of enlarging the pullout and kind of coming into that property?
We definitely are buying that option and getting this, and we will be working. Right now CDOT really they put that in, but they don't do a whole lot for management there.
Okay.
So we already do some of the administration there. This will give us a bigger role and definitely help us manage that to make it better for public use.
Thank you.
Barb? Jack?
This appears to be a positive for boaters, and I'm assuming that the management plan would evolve to the same level that Jaffe Park has. As far as how we manage access, egress, trash removal, quarterlets or whatever. Is that all part of it?
I think that will happen eventually. For the near term, what we'll do is, to mark the private-public property boundaries and do signage as necessary. We already require the rafters that operate there to put a porta potty in. So we'll continue with our management. We have a really good working relationship with them, so we'll continue with that management. We did, when we adopted our recreation inventory that we did last year, identify several action goals, and one of them was to do a kind of master study of access points along the rivers. So I think that would be the point at where you'd see a more detailed management plan come in.
One more question?
Yes.
Well, again, as I stated, it seems to be a positive for the boating community, but there's one problem potential that I have. Mr. Canaan will grant the county a trail easement. Mm-hmm. Where would a trail easement be, and what does that involve?
It's this yellow line right here. It's on an existing bench, and like I said, it's nothing that we plan to open right away because we would want to work cooperatively with the BLM first, but it preserves the ability to use that existing bench as a way to access the BLM property in the future. A potential use for that may be if we end up, we already work with the Roaring Fork Conservancy, or the Roaring Fork Conservancy is already working with the boaters that we permit to do a kind of interpretive training for them. So this might be a facility that would help with that, or other river interpretive things. So
would this be possibly intended to, though, access the BLM land and create a link to a trail system or something? Or?
I'm thinking more it would just be a river overlook point.
Very localized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, we would work with the BLM on that. And that's why I'm saying it wouldn't be opened immediately.
Yeah, and the timing is a matter of management plan and understanding the implications, but because I'm not familiar with what happens on the BLM land and the sensitivity relative to both the ecology and the wildlife, I am hesitant about talking about trails. Mm-hmm. And so I like the representation of what this possibly might evolve to. Though, you know, I know you're not saying that's the only thing, whatever, but I'd express my concern, so thank you.
Let me ask you, Barb, is there a management plan scheduled for this property then?
I think the immediate management that we're going to see in the coming season will, like I said, just be to delineate properties and signage, and if necessary, help delineate pathways from the ramp to this kind of open area here. I envision a larger, more all-encompassing look at river access points that is scheduled for 2015, which would maybe look at developing new amenities there. And once we acquire it, it'll either fall into the schedule of management plans that the stewardship side of the program has at that point or earlier if possible.
Yeah, I mean, my concern would be, given the numbers of people who use it, the effort is to provide space for those numbers. But I would hate to see those numbers overrun this property before a management plan is really in place and an assessment of what the nature of this property is and how to preserve the ecological features of this property without it becoming just an extension of the shoulder on Highway 82. Because that shoulder now is, quite frankly, misused for, it's a car lot, it is a heavy equipment storage lot, it is a bus storage lot for the river people. There's a serious problems at that particular junction. So, although I applaud the effort to acquire this property, I think it comes with more responsibilities than putting off a management plan down the road. It needs to be addressed immediately because of the intensity of use at this site, of all kinds of use, along with CDOT's cooperation, because I don't think that CDOT meant for a wide shoulder to become a used car lot on Highway 82. What are their intentions there?
CDOT is very willing to have us help them with management on that, and is very willing to explore having a management agreement on that. So.
Yeah, and from my point of view, it shouldn't include storage of empty dumpsters until they're ready to be used on some job site elsewhere, which is what it's used for now.
And I anticipate that being something that would be addressed once we have a position here.
So I'm urging you to deal with it up front rather than a year or two down the road. That's all. Board, any other comments, questions?
I agree with Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. Storage of overnight trailers or weekly storage, among other things, is out of place.
So I'll come back with a more detailed schedule on management for this property.
Okay, great. Thank you, Barb. Is there a motion? Motion?
I would move to approve the ordinance authorizing the acquisition of the Canaan parcel.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you.
The next item is an ordinance approving the purchase of the Columbines at Elk Run, Unit 603, for Pickett County employee housing inventory, and authorizing the chair to execute the necessary documents. John Redmond, Brian Pettit. I don't see Brian here.
I'm going to play Brian today.
But you also have to, you're in a dual role.
I can handle it. If you give me just a second, I'm just going to...
Okay, I'll give you a second.
Or more. Whoops. Okay. Thank you, Michael. John Peacock, County Manager. With the adoption of the 2012 budget, the board had appropriated just under $2.3 million for the purpose of acquiring workforce housing. The strategy adopted at that time by the board was to look at buying down existing units with the downturn in pricing in the real estate market. And there are some other factors that the board asked staff to consider, and that included that units be within the urban growth boundaries of Basalt, Snowmass Village, and or the city of Aspen, that we pay attention to accessibility to mass transit, so to RAFTA and livability issues and those sorts of things. And in terms of buying down, we'd be acquiring those units either for rental purposes or resale purposes, with approximately 50% to be committed to community housing and 50% for housing for county workforce. So what we have in front of you today is actually the first purchase that we're proposing using those funds and the appropriations. This will be the first property and what we hope will be a portfolio of properties we're able to acquire within those appropriations and the goals that the board set for us. The unit itself is in Basalt. It's 602 Wren Court, which is mapped up here. It's the pinpoint with the A. You can see that it's within easy walking distance of the Basalt schools, the downtown Basalt, and has easy accessibility to RAFTA. The unit is 1,992 square feet. It's a 3-bed, 3.5-bath, small with a small fenced yard. Has 2 storage areas as well as assigned parking. I'm sorry, I keep saying 602. I meant 603 Wren Court. So, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, I apologize. I had I was off on my number by 1. I'm pretty sure the map is accurate within a few feet here. At any rate, what we have in front of you today is the contract and ordinance to accept purchase of this property with either the chairs or the chair's designee. I've been acting in that capacity to this point, and would be happy to entertain any questions from the board. Let's see if anything.
What, any questions for John? Yes, Rachel?
Michael, the other question I have is the change from 2 assigned parking spaces to 1 assigned parking space. Why is that? Because this is a 3-bedroom unit, and it seems that at least 2 spots would be necessary.
Well, my understanding of that, Rachel, is that there was only 1 assigned with the unit originally, and that was a correction, more of a Scribner's error from the original. I don't know, John, if you have any additions to
That's
that.
my understanding.
Yeah.
Is there unassigned parking within the complex as well?
Visitor parking.
Yes.
So, but but can a homeowner have two cars and
Occupy the visitor parking lot?
no? It's a challenge. Thank you.
May I try one? Yes.
So, did I hear only 1 car totally?
Yes.
It's not realistic. I would hope there's other unassigned parking.
That part I don't know.
Well, some people would say that the Americans' attachment to vehicles at all is not realistic, and the fact that you can have one is wonderful. So, there's a balance here, and given that we've decided to choose houses within an urban growth area, that services are available on foot or by mass transit that wouldn't be available if you lived in a remote area with a number of parking areas. So I think it balances out for that, quite frankly. I don't think it's a limitation at all. Rob, do you have any?
Yeah, my only thought on that, I mean, I live in a unit where there's great abuse with the visitor parking areas, that, you know, if we do intend to move forward with the lease of this, that we make it clear in our lease that you are restricted to have one car, so that we don't take on the liability of having that person. You know, this is within walking distance to a lot of things. I think that it will fit for somebody. It won't fit for everybody, but I think you need to be upfront and honest with what the regulation is for the tenant that's going to be occupying this unit.
We'll have that clarified before second reading too, because I think there is unassigned parking available for the tenants also, but before I represent that, I want to clarify it and we can bring it to you by second reading.
Yes, Rob?
Different topic. I have a little bit of a problem moving forward with this type of acquisition without a plan on where we're going, how we're going to use this. And I'm going to be in favor of moving forward with this in first reading, but we've got a fairly large mitigation housing fund. We've allocated the direction to move forward with money as opportunities come up, and I think this is a good opportunity. But it's only as good as we know how it's going to be used, and I can envision ways that will create it as a good opportunity, but we don't know what category we're going to put this in. We don't know what type of whether it's going to be a county employee and what are the implications of how that is given to a county employee as a benefit for, I mean, any way you slice it in my mind, it's a benefit for a county employee to get to get in front of the line for a subsidized housing unit. What the subsidy actually turns out to be, based on the fact that we will be getting revenue back in the form of rent if we choose to rent it. We will be getting a sale price if we choose to sell it, with a deed restriction on it, but there'll be a subsidy valuation there. And I just think we need to have some matrix put together before we really start committing to decisions on acquisitions like this. My general thought process of my knowledge of categories, how things fit in with deed restrictions, and where this potentially might go, it seems to be a subsidy that's at a level that's tolerable for me to move forward with it. But I think that needs to be part of the discussion. I feel uncomfortable when the county makes these purchase decisions and says, well, we'll figure out the rest afterwards. So I don't know if we can at least get a 60,000 foot view of some of that on second reading. I don't know how to feel fully comfortable with that end of things, because the way I understand this is after second reading, we take possession of this 5 days after. Now, we're earning less than 1% or 0.5% on our money, or basically 0% on our money that's sitting in the bank. So there's not a real opportunity cost that's going to be lost. But the reality is it's money out there in an asset that's part of the formula is some sort of return on that asset at a subsidized cost, granted. But, it may take 2-3 months to figure out what that formula is before we get someone into this unit that we've taken possession. I don't know how quickly the board will move along with the budget schedule that we've got on figuring out what the right formula is to get this into our housing market. And I just hope that there's a parallel track that we can start working on to get that information.
Well, and that certainly, and those are all obviously very, very good points and something that we're cognizant of. Right now, what we're looking at is we do have a portfolio of potential purposes, and we are pursuing these purchases under the guidelines that the board had set out. And so what's always difficult to know is which ones you're going to be successful on and which ones you aren't. And we have no portfolio of assets that we own now. And so it would be my hope that we're not sitting on this for months, Rob. I don't think that would be the case or necessary, but I do think we need to see where a few more of these offers are headed so that we can come back to the board with the recommendations both of our staff from APSHA as well as internally our staff to say, okay, of these assets that looks like we'll be able to obtain, these seem to make the most sense to put into put into the portfolio for the community housing. We would suggest, these categories based on the discussions and information we've seen both from the housing work session that we've been participating with the City Council and APSHA Board, as well as the guidelines that they have around square footage and location and those sorts of things. And then look at the other units as being available to our staff, I would think under similar guidelines to what units are provided to the community. And certainly we've got it on our radar screen that as we're under contract, we need to be working on those recommendations and decision criteria for the board and bring them back. I would think by second reading, which is 2 weeks away, maybe we could give you a 30,000-foot view instead of the 60,000-foot view of how we would recommend this asset being used, and also maybe an understanding of where we're at in our attempts to acquire some other properties under this appropriation. So I agree.
And Rob, it's completely up to us. I mean, we can, the question can be directed to the board whether we want to go ahead with this purchase at all until we know how we're going to use our assets. So that's a question you can pose to us. But it seems to me the general direction has been to start acquiring and on a parallel, simultaneous track to develop how the plan we're going to do. So, I mean, I understand your concern, but we have to start somewhere, I think.
Michael?
Yeah.
And I guess my request, for us to direct staff is that by second reading we at least have some sort of picture of that, because honestly in the packet that we got, which is primarily the contract, there's no picture in terms of what use this is going to be. I mean, how many county employees are looking for housing? That would be an easy one. What category this, based on square footage, would fit into, and what prices those would generate? That would be an easy one. And so it would be my recommendation to ask the board to request that of staff by second reading.
So, board, do you want to direct staff? Do you have comments, Rachel?
Yeah, I can agree with the concept of more general outline, but I don't see it the same way as you do in terms of having to get down to a level of specificity. And I think, we've discussed this before, but I think that for our management team to be able to utilize it, 1 year they may be renting it at a much lower rate, and it's a larger size than the Category 2 normally is, but that's where we need to recruit and retain and be able to give someone an opportunity to move up, and that at other times it might be more of a Category 5 because it's a high earner couple with kids who can afford the higher rent. If this was a unit or a project that we were embarking on for resale through the general lottery program, then I would agree with you entirely. But I don't think that we're there yet. And I think there will be some, I don't think this is intended in that purpose. This is more about county housing as a county institution. And I cannot remember the number from yesterday, was it 200 and some odd county employees, 250?
70.
270 full-time equivalents. And as a business, we have close to 0 units. I think there's a couple that have been created through one that, through ComDev, I mean, not through ComDev, but through communications. And, you know, we look at where we are compared to the city and having created units for the sustainability of themselves as a business. And it is a, you know, night and day. They're probably up to close to half of their workforce at this point. And, you know, we are in an economic downturn now, so it's easy enough to point that perhaps someone could buy a unit down there at this time, but it's not going to be that way in the future. We know how much of our workforce is approaching retirement years, how much replacement we'll need of that workforce in the future, and we're a long-term operation. We're not going to, you know, say, well, the business climate has changed, so we're not going to have a county anymore. You know, it's not like other retail businesses or restaurant businesses or other businesses that may or may not go on for a long time because they don't have a secure lease. Well, we have a secure lease. We're in that building. We're going to be providing road plowing for a long, long time to come. So, yes, I can say let's get more structure around this so that at least you feel the questions are out on the table and are being answered. But do I need that before I move forward? No.
John?
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is an important and hopefully growing asset as far as part of a portfolio. But I hope we retain a considerable amount of flexibility in how we use this. I absolutely agree with Rob that it'd be nice to have maybe an outline, but more of an outline of questions to be answered than policy, because we've got a lot to deal with in any number of areas, which I won't take our time here, because then someone else, you know, we'd have a half hour of ideas, and that's not the purpose of this. But I don't even look at this as becoming part of APSHA's inventory. This is the county's inventory, and with that flexibility, we'll determine how it will be used, either for workforce housing in general or organizational. Now, we certainly might use APSHA guidelines, and we might mirror how that works. But I don't want to deed restrict this. I don't want to limit our use of this. This is an asset that we might decide there's another opportunity in 5 years that we want to dispose of and reinvest, for example. So all of this is up for discussion. Rob's right. Let's have a snapshot about maybe where we're going. But I think this is an absolute, with preparation by staff, an absolute work session, specific work session time, and 3 months is totally unacceptable to have even a final plan, but 2 weeks is way short of time to try to think through and digest the challenges I think that we face in making sure this is equitable and as how we disperse it, as well as how the organization and the community benefits as a whole.
Yes, Rob.
And I'm comfortable moving forward with this because I have enough knowledge of the bigger picture of how this will fit into, you know, an inventory. I'm comfortable with, you know, whatever, like everything we do, there's some level of risk, but I'm comfortable with the level of risk. I just want to make really clear, though, that we haven't made decisions on whether this is a rental unit or a selling unit afterwards. We haven't made a decision on whether or not this is a county employee unit or a open to the general public unit. We've talked about things in general, but as a board, we have not made a decision regarding this purchase, how this purchase is going to be used. And, you know, we may have ideas in our head how we want it to be used, but at some point in the process, we as a board have to decide based on, you know, what the subsidy cost is, based on what the benefit is for various people, based on what the benefit for community is. And I will just state that, these are mitigation dollars spent, for development to mitigate the stress on the community for the workforce that's here. And although in general I agree with the idea of the possibility of county employees being, as I think it came from our retreat session where we talked about 50-50%. But what the implications are to the general public of using a mitigation fund to help subsidize government in a way, I understand that the government is for everybody's benefit, and subsidizing government is for everybody's benefit. But there is a thought process.
I think you're just factually wrong, Rob, though, because our mitigation ordinance is very specific that all the dollars, 100%, can be used for county employees, and it's to offset the impact to the county, as opposed to other mitigation, which is to impact to the entire public and the broader.
Okay, we're gonna stop this discussion.
Factually, it's literally
Rachel,
for that.
Rachel, we're going to stop this discussion because I understand the concern, but what's in front of us is to purchase this property or not. And I think we want to have the discussion that Rob's referring to. We want to have the facts set straight. But if we take up time doing that, we might not purchase one piece of property. So if the board will agree, we'll have this discussion, a full-body discussion about where the direction of our housing mitigation program is going to go. But we can't have it today. And it's just that simple.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. It is 1:30 in the afternoon, and we're scheduled to go to 5 o'clock. I think there's plenty of time for dialogue on this item. We have 3 items at the table.
That's not a point of order, Rachel. That is your desire. Point of order is a procedural matter here at this table. And I'm suggesting there is no point of order to be addressed here. Unless we want to we want to table this and then go on with this discussion in its place. But my direction here is we either put a thumbs up or a thumb down on this property with the proviso that we will have a full-body discussion. But if we do that now, we won't purchase this property and we'll cripple this program. Where do we want to go?
I believe we have time for discussion if you're asking where we would like to go. And I do not want to leave a discussion on Grassroots TV or for the public with what's been, to my mind, thrown on the table, this lack of understanding of what we're going. It just seems like we threw a dart at a board to find a house. And that is not what has occurred. And we have discussed how this unit fits into our program within our executive session when these properties were brought to us. It's not as if we don't know how it may fit into our program. That was brought to us before. And I think we have our attorney here at the meeting who can clarify where our mitigation dollars come from. There's mitigation and there's housing impact. Some of those are restricted to simply to county, are available to be used for county employees. And I think clearing up simple statements of fact is something we have time for in this meeting.
I'm suggesting that the order of business in front of us is a thumbs up or a thumb down on the purchase of 603 Wren Court. And that we also can have this discussion at our next work session or subsequent work sessions, and we can have a staff that's prepared for the discussion, a staff that has the facts and figures. We can do our own research on those facts and figures. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that discussion, but the order of business here is the purchase or not purchase of 603 Wren Court. That's what the order of business is. And I understand that people have different points of view. But the point of view to be discussed here, shall we purchase this property or not? Jack?
Well, I think it's been a good discussion, and it's the initial step to getting more information. I would agree that the issue before us is this ordinance, and I think we should move forward and go through the process of thumbs up, thumbs down. I think staff has a real good handle on some of the ideas that they want to present, as well as what they've heard today. I agree there's plenty of time if we want to continue this, but I think it'd be more productive to do it in a work session. So, as unusual as it might seem, Michael, I'm going to agree with you.
No, we agree most of the time, Jack. Just about when we should end meetings. Rob?
First thing, I'd like to just make clear that it's not my opinion that we can't use these mitigation dollars for county employee housing. Second, I'd like to bring it back to this ordinance, because this ordinance is about spending specifically mitigation money, which requires a knowledge of what that mitigation money is supposed to be used for. And so I don't know if the language needs to be included in our package, exactly what that mitigation is for. I don't know if the attorney can give us, and for the general public, a good deal of, as you have expressed to me several times in meetings, Michael, a good deal of what we do here in these public meetings is not just for us to decide something, but also to convey to the public for transparency that we are looking at all the details of a various issue. So I'll ask the question of staff, if you so permit, Michael,
Sure.
to get an explanation of the interpretation of the mitigation money that is being used for the purchase of this acquisition.
John?
The restricted fund that is being accessed to acquire this property, or would be accessed to acquire the property, must be used in a manner consistent with state law. It must be used to provide housing to mitigate the original impact that was associated with the collection of the money. And some of that money preceded the current impact fee, and some was collected pursuant to that impact fee. But state statute doesn't make a discrimination as to which pot it would come from, so to speak. The money needs to be used to acquire capital asset or capital facility, and this certainly qualifies. It has to be expended in a manner that capital facility will be acquired and maintained and retained by the county for a period of at least 5 years. The alleviation of the impact that the mitigation fee relates to can be expended in any manner that meets those criteria by the BOCC. So the board could acquire this property and determine to make it available in the general lottery or through APCHA or ourselves. It could make the decision to make it available to county employees. Or if we retain title to the property, it can go back and forth, and we can manage it that it might meet a certain demand by county employees in relation to just hiring staff, or if there is not that need, it could be made available to the general pool and can go back and forth through time. We can deal with the property in a rental situation and collect rent. That would help defray the cost of the acquisition. And we can again do that openly or with to the general pool or county employees only. We can determine to sell the property and restrict the resale price such that it would be, or at least hopefully be, in a continually affordable situation as opposed to just being on the free market. We could also determine that we will sell the property instead of rent it, but upon termination of employment or any other precipitating event, that the property would be reacquired by the county, such that we could address any particular problems with upkeep of the property and updating our deed restrictions and so forth on the property. And I think those are more or less the options that I've heard discussed and that I'm aware of for the management profile. And so the board would have to make a couple of decisions as to how you wanted to go forward in managing this particular property if we acquired it. And I would be hopeful that the board would make those decisions in a pretty regular and straightforward process, so the property could be utilized and not, of course, just sitting there unutilized, because there certainly is a need for it. Does that answer your question?
Go ahead.
Well, one follow-up in terms of the process of determining the use of this property. Is there a protocol or process that has to go through? Is that a staff level decision? Is that a board decision? Is it something that comes through as a public hearing decision?
It is ultimately a board decision. You can delegate that decision-making process to somebody if you'd like, but to be honest with you, I would advise against it. I think it should reside with the board. As a consequence of it being a board decision, it will necessarily be an open and public decision-making process. It would not necessarily be a public hearing, but anybody could attend the meeting and observe the dialogue and perhaps make a comment if the board desired to allow it.
And is there any definition regarding the terminology to mitigate for the impact?
The definition is the plain meaning of the statute. That's statutory language, actually.
Okay.
And what that seeks to accomplish, at least within the body of the statute, is that if the county or any other governmental entity is going to establish a legislated fee schedule and then impose that fee schedule as essentially an exaction to the development, recognizing that the development occasions some sort of impact, and this we're dealing with, affordable housing or housing that's required as a consequence of the development of the property and the use of property, then the fee that is collected, that is charged to the property owner or the developer, has to relate to the degree of mitigation that would be appropriate to the development activity or the use of the property. And so the fee then is used as a consequence of that. In other words, to satisfy a new demand for affordable housing or workforce housing that is related to that development approval. I'm not talking around the question. I feel like sometimes I do.
Well,
sorry about that.
Obviously, it points out that we need to have a full discussion about the subject, and so I appreciate your response, and I appreciate that it can't be done in 3 words or less. So, so we will have a full body discussion about it, and I don't think the board needs to worry that we're not going to follow up on this. John?
Yeah, and for the sake of the discussion, we're purchasing a fungible asset. So we're taking one asset, cash, that's sitting in our accounts and has been for some time now, a lot of it, and we're converting it to another asset that the board is going to have the opportunity to make a decision how to allocate in the community. It's an asset that can ultimately be converted back into money. It goes back into that housing impact fund if for some reason we find that there's not a good way to allocate this property. We think there is. We think that I know right now we could use this for our internal purposes starting very soon. I think that the broader question is there a greater benefit to the community, or do we want to look at our portfolio as it develops? I think these questions are going to get easier. This is new for us. We haven't made these purchases. We do need to develop these policies. We do not have staff dedicated to this, so we're picking and choosing pulling from various departments right now and have a team approach. And that's not to make an excuse, but it's to say real estate opportunities are happening fast and they're moving fast, and yes, we understand we need to catch up and have this broader policy decision. I think we can move a long way towards that even before this purchase is finalized.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll make a motion if you'll entertain it.
Certainly. Jack?
Excuse me.
We'll have discussion after the motion's made.
Well, but the chair's option, I'd like to know if it's appropriate to amend the recitals.
No, certainly.
If Rob would like to wait before, is that acceptable?
Sure. I mean, the motion we want to do.
Yeah, so on item 2, I actually have one to add in. It would be a new number 2, and only because we've had this discussion. It would be, number 2 would be the acquisition is to be paid for from county mitigation funds. Is that reasonable to put in there? I don't know, but that was something that I heard that was a concern of where it was coming from. But the most important amendment that I would like to request is on existing number 2. I would like to retain part of the first sentence of the sentence. The purpose of the acquisition is to add the property to the county's employee housing inventory, period. And delete the rest of that sentence because we haven't had the conversation that Rob appropriately brought up. Because that language restricts us and does not give us flexibility. It says it will be deed restricted. And there will be qualifications. You know, we haven't digested this conversation. But the intent would be maintain the intent of number 2 by just deleting part of it. And feedback.
Rob?
Well, my question would be, does that preclude us from being able to use this mitigation money because the mitigation money is specifically for those purposes, even though those purposes are not fully defined?
The mitigation money is not for the purposes of, is not defined as having to be used through the APSHA program specifically, or under qualifications, or deed restriction. It didn't say if you contribute or if you pay your mitigation, you must deed restrict the result. I'm pretty sure. John, am I correct? We have flexibility here. Yes. Thank you.
Well, let me ask this question. Why wouldn't you delete employee housing inventory? Just say the purpose of this acquisition is to add to the property to the county housing inventory. Period.
That's great. It meets my intent to maintain flexibility of use of the funds.
John, is that a sufficient sentence? The purpose of the acquisition is to add property to the county's housing inventory, period.
That's totally fine, as is the other addition that Jack mentioned, referring to the source of the ultimate allocation of funds, which would be the housing mitigation fund.
Okay. So do you want to continue the motion with that?
So my motion with those 2 amendments would be to move in favor of the ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, approving the purchase of the Columbine at Elk Run Unit 603 for the Pickens County Employee Housing Inventory, and authorizing the chair to execute the necessary documents.
And I'll second that, and that does include the amendment.
Correct, including the 2
amendments,
amendments that
and I'll
were made
read
by
those.
Jack for first reading.
The new number 2 is the acquisition is to be paid for from county mitigation funds. And John and staff can look at that, and if it needs to be qualified, that's okay, but that's the intent. And the new 3, and then orderly going down the line would change, everything would add 1 number. And the new number 3 would be the purpose of the acquisition is to add the property to the county's housing inventory. And thank you.
So was there a second on that?
I second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? Rachel?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to say that for the record, from when I first joined this board, I was insistent that at least 50% of any units purchased or created through this mitigation fund should be for the general lottery. And it was certainly a different time period in '07 when people were looking at severe shortfalls for county employees and recruitment. And that was kind of novel that I was introducing, that there had to be at least 50% in my mind going back to the public, to general lottery. That was not the intent at that time with the housing plans that the county had. I would still stand by that. And I also think that as we have evolved and compromised as a board in trying to develop a housing plan, the concept of a portfolio of housing types was introduced, or housing purchases, potential land banking, potential public-private partnerships, and potential buy-downs. I think we kind of ruled out doing our own development, but that we would invest those funds within roughly thirds within each of those types of needs. I think this conversation points out the many challenges of buy-downs. Are you making less than your neighbors? Are you making more than your neighbors? The long-term maintenance fees, things like that. I see some merit in buy-downs, but it's not my preferred path. And I have compromised to say, yes, I can support some buy-downs as long as we're also continuing to support the other types of housing opportunities we have. I think there's many simpler housing opportunities, such as participating in an ongoing project that's being built a few miles from here, known as Burlingame, or some other private sector projects that are closer in. But I am willing to support this motion because the board as a whole had decided there would be a variety of housing options to be pursued. But I think that this conversation just begins to bring up that question, and I think it needs to be resolved. We will never have affordable housing opportunities for all 200 some odd employees at one time. Does that mean we do no housing opportunities for any of our employees? And will the subsidy for having to bring in someone with a great deal of technical experience be the same as the subsidy for someone with less experience but in a key position? I don't know, but I think that we have to get our arms around the fact that there will be subsidy on any housing that we produce that actually becomes affordable or is affordable to someone to use. If the free market could create it by itself without subsidy, we wouldn't need affordable housing programs, and it just simply hasn't occurred. That's all.
So there's a motion on the table. There's a second. We've had discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So the next item is, what is the next item?
Sprinklers.
Brian, do you know what the next item is? Yeah. It's an ordinance amending the Pickens County Code regarding mandatory residential sprinkler implementation date extension. So, Brian, we've decided to extend the date of mandatory sprinklers to when?
January 1st, 2016.
January 1st, 2016. Board, do you have any questions for Brian? No questions from, yes, Jack?
I'll just clarify. Brian, is the intent before this might become effective to work with staff and the community as to the final result of this? This is just delaying part of the code that needed to be, because it's supposed to be implemented January 1st, 2013. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah,
yes.
because that process is going to be important.
Yes.
As to determining, is that, do sprinklers go everywhere, in all, that's the key, all one and two family dwellings.
Right. This specifically addresses the mandate for single-family residents, and that was postponed originally when we adopted the 2009 codes to the 2013 date. We are, though, working with the 4 fire districts to come up with a good solution on how to handle that portion of the code, and that is the one aspect that needs to be addressed. And we feel like we don't have all the answers to give the board at this time. So we will be, and if we come up with a solution prior to 2016, we will come before you with an ordinance to address this.
Brian, have you included the building community in this particular ordinance?
Mostly it's been with fire marshals. We have spoken to other jurisdictions as far as from our perspective, and I have spoken to people who have worked in jurisdictions where this is a mandate. I've spoken to some of the contractors that work in the town of Snowmass. And it's interesting because the town of Snowmass, even though they allow the certain type of sprinkler systems that is allowed in the IRC, they're still doing it the old way, doing a mandated NFPA 13 system and not really going with the way that the code is written. So at this time, I haven't seen much history in the building community of people actually utilizing the P2904 system that's addressed in the IRC. And that's one of our hesitations, is that there's not much evidence that the system is being used. There is supposedly some history back on the East Coast where this type of system has been in place for a while, and we may be able to glean some information from that. But that's one of the things that we're trying to come up with the answers for.
Yeah, I think it would be worthwhile to find communities with experience in this in order to learn what the pitfalls and what the advantages of this code change. So this is a public hearing, is that right? Did I hear somebody say that? Are there members of the public who wish to address this matter at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing for this matter. And is there a motion? Motion?
I'll make it. Comment beforehand, I do appreciate you clarifying what I felt my intent when I said the public, that's fire districts and the construction industry development community sector. So just that clarification. If I could just get to, there it is. Okay, I would move to approve an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, amending the following section of Title II of the Pickens County Code, Section R313.2, 1 and 2 family dwellings automatic fire systems.
It should read Title 11.
Is that 11 or 2? Brian?
It is Title 11. That's our section.
Thanks, Rob. And I
Good catch, Rob.
correct myself in saying that is a 11.
So is there a second?
Second.
Rob seconded. And any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much, Board.
All I do is read down a little further. It's very clear.
It looks like a rubber.
So the next item is a land use public hearing. I think we'll take a 5-minute break or so until we have some land use public hearing people present, so. Right?
We're all here.
We are, oh, you guys were in the back. Well, we'll reconvene at 2 o'clock.
7 minutes.
session for October 10, 2012. It's a little past 2 o'clock, and we're at the section of land use public hearing. But it's my understanding that most of these are being continued. Where is staff?
Right here.
Right here. Lance, are you going to tell us what's been continued?
Yes, sir. Lance Clark, Pitkin County Community Development. The land use public hearings for Lanedo 12 LLC, Silver Creek Lot 2 activity envelope, Lanedo 12 LLC, Hidden Treasure Parcel Activity Envelope, Last Chance number 2, South Parcel Activity Envelope, Last Chance number 2, North Parcel Activity Envelope. The applicant has requested that they be given the opportunity to respond to the concerns that staff raised in the staff reports that you have, and the applicant is requesting that these 4 items be continued till December 5th. Jim Curtis is here to represent the applicant. If you have any questions about their request for continuance, staff would support their request for continuance because we did feel there were serious items that needed to be addressed, and it would make our discussion more thorough if they had that opportunity.
Jim, is that right? December 5th?
Correct.
Okay. Board, any questions? Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to continue items on our agenda under land use public hearing 1, 2, 3, and 4 to date certain December 5th. And it is a public hearing too. So.
Other members of the public who wish to comment on this continuance or these matters at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, who seconded that? I didn't hear.
Jack.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. The next item of business is the McCormick subdivision exemption to create open space parcel. Barb, are you going to lead this discussion?
Barb is actually the applicant, and I will, again, Open Space and Trails is the applicant for this. This is to allow closing and consummation of a purchase that's already been authorized by the Board of County Commissioners. It was recommended to you by the Open Space and Trails Board, and the Board of County Commissioners has authorized the purchase of a piece of property at the end of Redstone Boulevard that is owned by Bob McCormick. It's the parcel where the country store is today. It's about a 1-acre parcel. And Open Space and Mr. McCormick have been talking for some time about the potential of Open Space purchasing the portion of this 1-acre parcel that is adjacent to the Crystal River and across the river from Elk Park. And that's the parcel that you see in red there, which is approximately 6.72 acres. That will leave a 0.3 acre parcel in Mr. McCormick's ownership where the country store will continue to reside. As I said, the county has already authorized this purchase. Barb can speak to the open space values of that property as it's adjacent to the Crystal River and across from Elk Park. In order to consummate the purchase, there does have to be a subdivision of the parcel. And as you know, 6 or 7 years ago, we created a provision in the Land Use Code for a subdivision exemption specifically for open space purchases. It's a subdivision exemption that allows an expedited one-step subdivision review to the Board of County Commissioners. That's what we're doing today. It even allows the creation of substandard, non-conforming parcels. However, in this case, because of the village commercial zoning in Redstone, which allows small lots, each of these lots is conforming with the village commercial zone district minimum lot standards. So this proposed subdivision exemption to create the open space parcel is in conformance with that provision of the Land Use Code, and staff has reviewed that and recommends that it be approved by the Board of County Commissioners. I would like to point out that you have in your packet 2 comment letters from well-known Redstonians supporting this, Bill Yocums and Greg Durrett, but I also received, too late for your packet, and I will give to Lindy an email from the Redstone Community Association, and I'll read it. On October 2nd, at the regular monthly meeting of the Board of Directors of the Redstone Community Association, the directors voted to strongly endorse the subdivision and purchase by open space of the McCormick property across from the historic Redstone Inn. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank the Board of County Commissioners and Open Space for all that they have and are doing to enhance and protect the entrance to Redstone. We are excited and encouraged by the new plan that is being worked on for Elk Park. Sincerely, Steve Pavlin, President of the Redstone Community Association, Kathy Montgomery, Vice President of the Redstone Community Association.
Thank you, Lance. Are there questions for staff? Barb, do you want to add anything further to this? Glenn, are you here as the land use planner for open space and trails?
I represent Bob McCormick and Open Space and Trails.
Okay. Is that the first time you've been in that capacity?
Let me think. I've represented Bob McCormick before.
But not Open Space and Trails?
I think at some point in the past I have, but I can't recall.
Okay. It's an unusual situation, and that's why I asked.
I don't have a whole lot to add other than thanks again to Bob McCormick for working with us and making this property available as open space. It will complement our current efforts on Elk Park to improve and enhance the entrance to Redstone.
Board, any questions for Barb? Yes, Jack?
Yeah, no question, just from my perspective, and I believe we just heard an agreement that we very much appreciate Bob McCormick's positive contributions in Redstone, in particular this one today.
Is there a motion?
It's a public hearing.
Oh, it's a public hearing. Are there members of the public who wish to make a comment on this particular item at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Okay. I would make a motion to approve the McCormick subdivision exemption to create an open space parcel.
Second.
Any further discussion, board? All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Glenn, splendid job.
And Glenn, thanks for not producing an encyclopedia.
We're now at BOCC open discussion. Our board is in the open discussion.
I would just note for the board that I was counting on a little bit longer land use portion to have my final contact with Eagle County to finalize our agenda for Monday. I'll be doing that this afternoon. I'll shoot it out as an email to you.
Okay. Thank you, John. Yes, Jack?
Yeah, I'd like to raise an issue relative to our action yesterday about mountain rescue and indicating that we would be willing to contribute planning fees. I had actually a member of the public call me this morning and say, and friendly question posed, and so I'll state it here, how can we say we'll pay for the planning fees when we're going to weigh in on a land use application? John, do you see how we can, John or John Ely, how we can sift through, have we prejudiced ourselves, quote unquote? Just so I would add this out, because it was a fair question, and I think there's no question that this board, when that land use application comes before us, will act independently and, render a decision appropriate to the application. But it is a fair question when we've indicated we would weigh in already on the planning fees.
Well, let me give my opinion on that, Jack. What we asked Joey Shallow to do, the sheriff, was to make an appropriation, a supplemental appropriation request for the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department would be paying for that planning fees, not the commissioners directly. We could deny the request for that supplemental appropriation or not, but I think we've kept it at arm's length, and personally I'm fine with it. John?
And Jack, I wouldn't say that it would prejudice the board any more than review of any other public sector project that you go through. And I think how we couched that yesterday was that mountain rescue is fulfilling a core function that would otherwise be the responsibility of the sheriff's department, and that this is a facility that will come under review for the purpose of undertaking those responsibilities. And all we've done is make an appropriation decision, just as we just had open space and trails in front of us, for example. And I don't see that it does anything in terms of the outcome of that process. It's really about the financial relationship of how do we go about providing those services. This is one of those costs.
And may I just clarify, Rich? Okay, timing-wise, I believe, we wouldn't be paying fees. We're not paying the fees up front. They have to be paid, and is this somewhat how we deal with discretionary monies, or will that appropriation come through the sheriff before the process starts?
The way, well, I think it was our intention, and unless John weighs in differently, our intention was to bring the appropriation forward now and have it appropriated in the sheriff's budget. But you will be seeing nothing about the project. There will be nothing. You will see nothing about the project. It has nothing to do with the merits of the project. All this decision has to do with is this is a core function, and the sheriff is asking for an appropriation to support the potential, for them pursuing the expansion of their facilities.
Do you want John Wheely to weigh in?
I don't have anything to add.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Rachel?
I was just going to say, I think this might be a little bit analogous, Jack, and I do think it's a good question. I'm glad you've brought it forward. The city had to review the fire station in town, even though the city owned the land under the fire station and gives it to the fire station as a lease. And so, they have some connection there and that sort of thing. And then secondly, it's my understanding that landing fees are due even if you are denied. Mm-hmm. And so that opportunity continues to exist even if we are telling them we're assisting them with their financials of the initial getting into the process. There's no guarantee of an outcome.
Well, thanks everyone for the feedback. I thought it was a fair question, and I shared it.
Any further open discussion? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Grassford. Thank you, Barry.